Why did Grandma take everything?
Because this wasn't a vacation, son. It was our funeral, and they expected us to die here.
The moment I understood my family wanted my son and me dead, I was standing barefoot in a mountain clearing, holding a rain-soaked note that had been nailed to a pine tree. Noah is your responsibility now. This had to happen. Do not come looking for us. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 38 years old, recently widowed, and trying to raise my 9-year-old son without falling apart in front of him. That morning, my parents, my sister, and her husband had driven away from our rented cabin in the Colorado mountains. They took both vehicles, every phone charger, the food, the blankets, the medicine, and even my son's winter coat. They left us 2 granola bars, half a bottle of water, and a storm moving over the ridge. For the first 10 minutes, I told myself it was a cruel joke. By sunset, I knew it was attempted murder. And 9 days later, when a rescue helicopter finally found us, my family learned something they should have understood long before they abandoned us. Grief had weakened me. It had not finished me. My wife, Claire, died 14 months before the trip. Cancer took her slowly enough for us to understand what was happening, but quickly enough that we never felt prepared. She was 40 years old. Noah was 8. I still remember the last afternoon she was fully awake. She asked me to open the curtains because she wanted sunlight in the room. Then she took my hand and said, "Promise me he will never feel like a burden." I promised. My family did not understand that kind of grief. My father, Richard, called it weakness. My mother, Elaine, called it unhealthy attachment. My sister, Melissa, called it embarrassing. Her husband, Troy, called it an opportunity. Claire had left behind a life insurance payment, our house, and a trust for Noah's education. It was not a fortune. Most of the insurance money had already gone toward medical bills, therapy, and keeping our mortgage current while I worked reduced hours. But my father spoke about that money as if it belonged to the family. Soon, the pressure became quieter. 2 months later, Melissa invited us on what she called a healing trip. She said Troy had found a large cabin near Silverton, Colorado. No work, no school, no therapy appointments, just clean air, family meals, and a chance to start over. Every part of me wanted to refuse. Then Noah heard there would be a creek behind the cabin. "Mom used to like creeks," he said. That sentence made the decision for me. We drove into the mountains on a Friday morning in late September. The higher we climbed, the more the world narrowed into pine trees, dark rock, and empty road. Cell service vanished 20 miles before we reached the property. The cabin stood alone in a wide clearing with a rusted fire ring and a creek somewhere below the eastern slope. It looked beautiful in the rental photographs. In person, it felt too isolated. I noticed several things that first evening. My mother brought a folder containing papers she wanted me to sign. The top page would have made my father a temporary financial manager if I became unable to make responsible decisions. I pushed the folder back across the table. "I came here for Noah," I said. "Not to surrender my life." At the time, I thought they wanted the house. I did not understand that they wanted something much worse. The next morning, Troy woke us before sunrise. He was cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed. He made pancakes, poured coffee, and suggested Noah and I walk down to the creek while everyone prepared lunch. "Give us an hour," he said. "We'll surprise you." Noah pulled on his small blue backpack. Inside it, he had a notebook, 2 granola bars, a plastic whistle, and a stuffed fox Claire had given him during her final hospital stay. He called the Fox Ranger. I wore jeans, hiking shoes, and a light jacket. The sky was clear, and I expected to be gone less than an hour. As we stepped off the porch, Noah stopped. "Dad, Uncle Troy said something strange." "What did he say?" "He was on the phone by the truck. He said, 'They're leaving now. Be ready.'" I looked back. Troy stood in the doorway smiling at us. "Everything okay?" he called. I told myself Noah had misunderstood. That was my last moment of innocence. The creek was farther away than Troy had claimed. The path faded after the first half mile, and we had to follow the sound of water through thick brush. Noah skipped stones while I watched the clouds gather above the ridge. After 40 minutes, I told him we should return. When we climbed back into the clearing, the cabin was gone. Not physically gone. Everything that made it shelter had disappeared. Both vehicles were gone. The front door stood open. The bedrooms had been stripped. The kitchen cabinets were empty. The mattresses, blankets, towels, flashlights, batteries, food, bottled water, medicine, and firewood had all been removed. "Dad," he whispered, "where is everybody?" I found the note outside, nailed to the largest pine tree. The paper had been folded inside a clear plastic sleeve. My mother's handwriting covered half the page. "Daniel, we cannot continue supporting your choices. Noah is your responsibility now. You need to understand what life feels like without the family rescuing you from every mistake. This had to happen. Do not come looking for us." I wanted to tell him it would be all right. Instead, I looked at the empty road, the bare cabin, and the darkening sky. This was not a lesson. A lesson leaves a way home. They had removed every way home. The rain became heavy before sunset. The cabin had walls and a roof, but without blankets, heat, or dry clothing, it turned into a wooden refrigerator. I tore cabinet doors from their hinges and used pages from an old rental binder as kindling. The only reason we made a fire was because Noah had kept a cheap magnifying lens in his backpack for looking at insects. The clouds opened for less than 3 minutes, and I focused the weak sunlight onto a strip of dry paper beneath the porch. By morning, the temperature had dropped close to freezing. We had half a bottle of water and 2 granola bars. I gave Noah most of both. The creek solved one problem, but created another. The water looked clean, yet I knew mountain water could carry bacteria. I found a dented metal mixing bowl behind the cabin and boiled water over the fire. On the second day, I followed the road for 4 miles while Noah stayed beside me. The road climbed instead of descending. By afternoon, my right ankle had swollen from a fall on loose rock. We found fresh tire tracks, but no houses, power lines, or signs. When the rain returned, we turned back. On the third morning, I found the first proof that my family had expected us to die. Behind the woodshed, buried beneath wet leaves, was a torn cardboard box from a moving company in Durango. A delivery label showed the date from the day before our trip. They had hired people to remove everything before we returned from the creek. This had been arranged in advance. Noah watched me stare at the label. "Are Grandma and Grandpa bad people?" he asked. I wanted to protect him from the answer. But the mountains had taken away the luxury of comforting lies. "They made a dangerous choice," I said, "and we are going to survive long enough to make them answer for it." That was the first time I spoke of survival as revenge. The days became a series of small battles. We collected rainwater in the metal bowl. We searched under porch boards and found 3 packets of sugar, a salt shaker, and a can of beans that had rolled behind a pipe. I opened the can by scraping its rim against a flat stone until the metal weakened. Noah said they were the best beans he had ever tasted. On the 4th night, something moved outside the cabin. I heard claws against the porch and saw a black bear through the broken kitchen window. It smelled the empty bean can. I stood in the doorway holding a burning chair leg while Noah blew his whistle as hard as he could. The bear rose onto its back legs, taller than the doorframe. Then it dropped, turned, and disappeared into the rain. Noah's hands shook so badly he could not hold the whistle. I wrapped him in the plastic tablecloth we were using as a blanket. "Dad," he said, "I don't want to die because they're mad at us." "You listen to me," I said. "We are not dying for their plan. We are going home, and everybody is going to learn exactly what they did." On the 5th day, I decided we could not wait inside the cabin. No one knew the address except the people who had abandoned us. Noah had missed school, but my family could easily claim I had taken him somewhere without telling anyone. We needed to reach higher ground and create a signal. I packed boiled water in 2 plastic bottles we found near the creek. I wrapped Noah's feet in strips cut from the tablecloth and placed Ranger inside his backpack. Then we followed a narrow animal trail toward the ridge. Halfway up, I slipped and struck my head against a rock. When I opened my eyes, Noah was kneeling beside me. Blood covered his fingers. "Dad, please wake up." I do not know how long I had been unconscious. The sky had changed color. My vision doubled whenever I stood. We could not reach the ridge. We crawled beneath an overhang and spent the night pressed together while the wind screamed through the trees. I developed a fever before dawn. At one point, I woke to find Noah gone. Panic forced me upright. I called until my throat burned. Then he appeared through the trees carrying the metal bowl with both hands. "I got water," he said. "I bowled it like you showed me." He was 9 years old. He should have been worrying about homework and soccer practice. Instead, he was keeping his father alive. On the 7th day, the weather cleared. Noah and I returned to the cabin because it was the only landmark we understood. I could barely walk. My lips were cracked. My hands had begun shaking even when I was not cold. We had not eaten since the beans. That afternoon, Noah told me again about Troy's phone call. "They're leaving now," he repeated. "Be ready." The words settled differently this time. Troy had not been speaking to my family. They were already in the cabin. He had been speaking to the movers. I took my mother's note from my pocket and examined the plastic sleeve. A tiny barcode had been printed on the bottom. It came from a home office supply store near my parents' neighborhood. The note was not written in anger that morning. It had been prepared before the trip. Every detail had been prepared. On the 8th day, we climbed again. I tied Noah to me with strips of fabric so that if I fell, we would not become separated. We carried damp pine branches, pieces of broken furniture, and the plastic sleeve from the note. Near the top of the ridge, we found an old fire ring built from stone. I used the magnifying lens to start a flame, then fed it green branches until thick white smoke rose above the trees. That night, the temperature fell again. We returned to the cabin after midnight and collapsed on the floor beside the dead fireplace. I remember thinking that if I fell asleep, I might not wake up. Then I heard Claire's final request. "Promise me he will never feel like a burden." I opened my eyes. Noah was curled against me, his face pale in the moonlight. I forced myself to sit up. I rubbed his arms, spoke his name, and made him drink the last mouthful of water. "We are walking again tomorrow," I told him. He did not answer. "We are walking," I repeated, because they do not get to decide where our story ends. What I did not know was that, more than 100 miles away, Deputy Carla Reyes had already begun looking for us. Noah's school had called my mother after he missed 3 days without notice. My mother claimed I had taken him on an extended trip because I was emotionally unstable. The school counselor did not believe her. She contacted police. Deputy Reyes visited our house and found an open mail, spoiled food, and Claire's framed photograph still beside my bed. My car was gone, but Noah's medication, school backpack, and favorite shoes were still there. It did not look like a planned disappearance. It looked like someone had interrupted our lives. Deputy Reyes requested financial records and found a payment to a cabin rental company under a temporary email account. She called the company, obtained the location, and convinced Sheriff Voss to launch a search before the paperwork was complete. A helicopter reached the area on the morning of the 9th day. Then I remembered the plastic sleeve. I tore it open, removed my mother's note, and held the clear plastic toward the sun. The light flashed once, then twice, then again. The helicopter turned. Deputy Reyes came down with the rescue team. She knelt in front of Noah, wrapped him in a thermal blanket, and asked his name. "No, Mercer," he whispered. Then he pointed at me. "That's my dad. He kept us alive." By the 3rd day in the hospital, police had arrested Troy. By the 4th, Melissa and my father were taken in. My mother turned herself in through a lawyer. They had expected sympathy. They had expected people to believe I was grieving, unstable, and reckless. They had saved old text messages in which I admitted I could not sleep. They had collected photographs of my unwashed kitchen, canceled appointments, and unopened mail. They wanted those fragments to look like evidence of a man falling apart. They had not expected Noah to remember Troy whispering into his phone. They had not expected the moving company to keep its delivery records. They had not expected my mother's note to survive wind, rain, and 9 days in my pocket. Most of all, they had not expected me to keep walking. Sheriff Voss arrived with folders. Each folder contained another part of the plan my family had built around us. Troy had contacted the cabin company through a temporary email address. He told the movers that the vacation had been canceled and that no one would remain at the property. My father had withdrawn cash 2 days before the trip. Melissa had searched online for missing person investigations, life insurance procedures, and how long rescue teams usually continued looking in remote mountain areas. My mother had written 3 versions of the note. Police found the other 2 in her desk. The first version said I had taken Noah without permission. The second claimed I had threatened the family and disappeared voluntarily. The final version was the one nailed to the tree. Their plan depended on confusion. They would return home and wait. When someone noticed Noah had missed school, they would claim I had become overwhelmed by grief and vanished with him. They would say they tried to stop me. They would cry in front of cameras. Then, after enough time passed, they would petition for access to Noah's trust. Claire had protected the house, the remaining insurance funds, and Noah's education money. If both Noah and I were declared dead, my parents believed they could challenge the estate arrangement as his closest surviving relatives. They didn't just abandon us. "I told Sheriff Voss no," he said. "They created a situation they believed you would not survive." For the first time since the rescue, I allowed myself to feel pure anger. Not panic, not grief, anger. My family had taken the 2 worst things that ever happened to me, the loss of my wife and my struggle to keep raising our son, and turned them into weapons. They had looked at my grief and seen an opportunity. 3 weeks later, Noah and I returned home. The porch was covered with flowers, groceries, and handwritten cards. Some came from neighbors I barely knew. Others came from parents at Noah's school. One note had been written in green crayon. "Dear Noah, your desk is waiting for you." He read that sentence 5 times. Then he sat on the porch steps and cried. I sat beside him. Neither of us tried to hide it. For the first month, we slept in the living room because Noah could not tolerate closed bedroom doors. We kept a lamp on all night. I placed bottled water, snacks, blankets, and a charged phone in a basket beside the couch. Our therapist called it a safety station. Noah called it our survival corner. Slowly, ordinary life returned. The refrigerator hummed. The school bus arrived each morning. Mail appeared in the box. Nothing vanished while we were away. But the legal case followed us everywhere. My parents hired an expensive defense team. Melissa told relatives that Troy had manipulated everyone. My father claimed he thought they were only teaching me a lesson. My mother said she believed another group would arrive later and take us home. None of their stories matched the receipts, searches, messages, or recorded calls. Then Troy offered a deal. He agreed to describe the entire plan in exchange for a reduced sentence. According to him, the idea began months earlier during a family dinner. My father complained that I had wasted Claire's insurance money on medical bills and therapy. Troy laughed and said, if Daniel disappeared, all those problems would disappear with him. At first, everyone treated it like a joke. Then Melissa asked what would happen to the house. My mother asked what would happen to Noah's trust. The joke became a conversation. The conversation became a plan. Troy chose the site because cell service was almost non-existent. My father selected the weekend. Melissa made sure no one outside the family knew the exact location. My mother wrote the note. The most painful part was not learning who suggested each detail. It was learning how often they discussed it at breakfast, in the car, during family gatherings, while sitting 10 feet away from Noah and me. The trial began 8 months after the rescue. By then, Noah was 10. He had grown taller, but he still checked every room before sleeping. Ranger, the stuffed fox, remained on his pillow. The courthouse in Durango was smaller than I expected. Reporters gathered near the entrance, but Deputy Reyes guided us through a side door. "You don't owe them a statement," she reminded me. Inside the courtroom, my family sat together. My father wore a dark suit and stared straight ahead. Melissa looked thinner. Troy sat several seats away from her, because their attorneys had advised them not to communicate. My mother turned when Noah entered, her mouth opened. "Noah!" she whispered. He froze beside me. For one terrible second, I thought he would run to her. She had been his grandmother. She had baked his birthday cakes. She once stayed beside him all night when he had the flu. Children do not forget love simply because adults betray it. Noah reached for my hand. Then he looked at her and asked, "Why didn't you leave us water?" The entire courtroom became silent. My mother lowered her eyes. She never answered. The prosecutors presented the cabin receipt, bank withdrawals, internet searches, moving records, and messages between Melissa and Troy. One message had been sent 40 minutes after Noah and I left for the creek. "Melissa, they're out of sight. Troy, start loading." Another message came from my father. "Richard, make sure nothing useful stays behind." My mother's message came last. "Elaine, the letter is ready." Their attorneys argued over intention, timing, and responsibility. But there was one thing they could not explain away. Noah and I had been left in a remote area with no transportation, no communication, almost no food, and no reliable heat. They knew the temperature would fall after sunset. They knew no one else had the address. They did not call for help. They did not return. On the 7th day of the trial, my attorney asked whether I wanted to speak. I had prepared a statement for weeks. It was 11 pages long and filled with everything I wanted to say to my parents since childhood. I wrote about the money they controlled, the apologies they demanded, the way Melissa was always forgiven, and the way my grief embarrassed them. But when I stood before the court, I folded those pages and placed them back in my pocket. "I don't need revenge," I said. "I need the truth to remain the truth." My father finally looked at me. "You taught me that family loyalty meant silence. You taught me to forgive every insult because we shared a last name. I believed you for 38 years. My voice trembled, but I continued. Then my son watched me search dirt with bleeding hands because the people he trusted had taken everything. He spent 9 nights believing his grandparents did not care whether he came home. My mother began to cry. I did not stop. "You did not only leave us in those mountains. You tried to leave Noah with the belief that he was unwanted. That is the part I will spend the rest of my life correcting." The jury found all 4 guilty on multiple charges. Troy received the longest sentence because he organized the transport, created the false booking records, and directed the movers. Melissa and my father received substantial prison sentences. My mother received less time after cooperating, but the judge made one condition clear. None of them could contact Noah without future court approval and the recommendation of his therapist. The financial consequences followed quickly. Their defense costs consumed most of my parents' savings. My father lost his position on the board of a local charity. Melissa's employer dismissed her after the messages became public. Troy's business collapsed when clients learned he had used company accounts to pay the movers. Through my attorney, I transferred Noah's trust to an independent institution that none of them could ever challenge or control. I also filed a civil case. I did not want their house or their last dollar. I wanted every expense connected to our rescue, medical care, trauma therapy, and legal protection placed where it belonged, on them. The settlement forced my parents to sell the vacation property they had once bragged would become Melissa's inheritance. That was the closest thing to revenge I allowed myself. They had tried to steal my son's future. Instead, the value of their favorite property was deposited into a protected account for his education and recovery. When the sentencing hearing ended, my mother stood as officers approached. "Daniel," she called. I turned. "I'm sorry." "Oh, for years." Those 2 words would have broken me. That day they did not. "I believe you are sorry now," I said. But regret after consequences is not the same as love before them. Then Noah and I walked out together. The case ended, but healing did not arrive like a dramatic sunrise. It came quietly. It came the first time Noah slept through the night. It came when he joined the school hiking club, even though he only attended meetings and refused to step onto a trail. It came when I returned to work part-time. It came when I finally packed Claire's clothes instead of leaving them untouched in our closet. One afternoon, almost 2 years after the rescue, Carla Reyes stopped by our house. She was no longer wearing her uniform. She carried a paper bag filled with sandwiches and a folded map. Noah eyed the map suspiciously. Carla placed it on the table. "There's a nature path near town," she said. "Half a mile. Flat ground. Phone service the entire way. Ranger station at both ends." Noah looked at me. "We don't have to go," I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Can we bring too much water?" Carla smiled. We can bring an unreasonable amount of water. The following Saturday, the three of us stood at the entrance to the trail. Noah wore a bright blue backpack packed with bottles, snacks, a whistle, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and Ranger the stuffed fox. He checked my phone signal twice. Then he stepped forward. The path wound through tall pines and opened beside a narrow creek. Sunlight flashed across the water. Birds moved in the branches. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed. Noah stopped at the edge. For a moment, I saw the 9-year-old boy from the mountains again, cold, frightened, and trying not to cry. Then he reached down and picked up a smooth gray stone. "This looks like the first one I found that day," he said. My chest tightened. "We can throw it away," I told him. He shook his head. "No, I think I'll keep it." He placed the stone in his backpack. That was when I understood. Healing did not mean erasing what happened. It meant carrying the memory without letting it decide where we could go. A year later, I sold our old house. Not because my parents wanted me to. Not because I was running from Claire's memory. I sold it because Noah and I were ready to choose something new. We bought a smaller home near Durango with a yellow kitchen, a wide front porch, and neighbors who waved when they passed. Carla lived 10 minutes away. Over time, she became more than the deputy who found us. She became the person Noah called when he needed help with a science project. She became the friend who left soup on our porch when I had the flu. She became the woman who understood that some silences needed patience, not questions. There was no sudden romance. There were school events, shared dinners, long conversations, and one evening when she fell asleep on our couch while Noah watched a movie. 2 years after our first safe hike, Carla and I married in the backyard. There were no luxury decorations, no large crowd, no relatives demanding attention. Noah stood beside me holding the rings. He wore a dark blue suit, and Ranger's stuffed head peeked from his backpack. Before the ceremony, he pulled me aside. "Dad," he said, "do you think Mom would like Carla?" I looked toward the garden where Carla was laughing with his teacher. "Yes," I said. "I think your mom would be relieved that we found someone who stays." Noah nodded. "That's what I think too." After the wedding, we planted 3 pine trees near the edge of the yard. One for Claire, one for the life Noah and I survived, one for the family we chose afterward. Every year on the anniversary of our rescue, we do not speak about the people who left us. We pack sandwiches. We carry too much water. Then we walk the same short trail near town. Noah is 14 now. He no longer checks every doorway. He sleeps with the light off. Ranger sits on a shelf above his desk beside the stone he found near the creek. Last month he told me he wants to become a search and rescue pilot. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew. He looked at the old rescue photograph hanging in our hallway. Carla was kneeling beside him beneath the helicopter blades. I was barely standing behind them. "Because somebody kept looking for us," he said. "I want to be that somebody for someone else." I spent years wondering what I had taken from my family. Money, attention, patience, pride. But standing there beside my son, I finally understood the truth. Grief had not made me weak. Asking for help had not made me selfish. Surviving had not created a debt I owed to the people who wanted to control me. My real responsibility was never to keep my parents comfortable. It was to keep my son safe. The note my mother left on that pine tree said Noah was my responsibility now. She wrote it as punishment. She never understood that he had always been my responsibility, my reason, and my greatest gift. My family disappeared from that mountain clearing because they believed removing shelter, food, and support would erase us. They were wrong. 9 days later, a helicopter found 2 people who had refused to give up. Years later, we built something stronger than what they took. A home where nobody vanished to teach a lesson. A family where grief was not treated like failure. A life where love did not demand silence, fear, or repayment. Sometimes Noah still asks what would have happened if the helicopter had arrived 1 day later. I never answer that question. Instead, I remind him of what did happen. We shared the last drops of water. We kept moving. We were found. And when we came home, we learned that blood can explain who you came from, but it cannot decide who deserves to stand beside you. Family is not the people who leave you in the mountains and call it a lesson. Family is the person who keeps walking with you until the mountains are finally far behind.